great city, great people. Look at what they did down in out in California. I think it was Bakersfield or another town. Just let it go into bankruptcy. If you drive up and down the eastern seaboard on back roads, Route 1, you see towns collapsing. You see signs upstate New York that say, we want clean water. This just can't go on. You can't say on the one hand, we can spend $1 trillion on a nuclear weapon, and on the other hand, give the states $100,000 to deal with polluted water. And as you know, the Canadians brought truckloads of water down to Flint and down to Detroit to help people out. I mean, it's
unbelievable.
And you've got to ask yourself, this goes back to the Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians versus Captain Klutz, the wonderful Mad Magazine character. Things have gotten cartoonish in reality, but it's tragicomedy. I mean, this is a serious business, serious election, serious issues.
Okay, but here's the segue, John. Here's the segue because you're going into the segue. And again, I'm just trying to be candid, and I want you to be candid. And you have experience. You've been around. No, you've been around the block. You've traveled. You've been. Why is it that so few Americans, so few of your neighbors and my neighbors, give a damn about the fact that over half their tax money is going down the toilet for the military, and we have nothing for infrastructure, for a safety net in this country? Why? What is the sociological reason that most people don't care?
Well, I'm going to just be repeating what many others have here. I think there's a number of factors. There's not just one, as you well know. I think part of it is how I'm talking to you by cell phone. If you think 30 years ago, you walk down the street, you actually look somebody in the eye and say hello, but everybody's looking down at the cell phone. And we're communicating, but we're becoming more like nodes in this communication network rather than sympathetic, empathetic human beings talking to each other. There's so much information and so many sources of information that people tend to flit about, if you will, like water bugs on top of a lake. And I think we're moving so quickly and so fast that we've forgotten how to use quiet space, or to be able. I used to teach a course on national security to students, and I'd say, how long do you think you'd last without your cell phone and access to the internet? And all of them said maybe a day. And they start going nuts. Well, that's adults too. And so we're teaching a generation of youngsters who are, by the way, marketed to tremendously by corporations. We're teaching them, we adults are, to, use that cell phone. Go ahead, bring it to the dinner table. Play 20 hours of video games a day. That's part of our fault, and it's part of why our education system is so screwed up, because we can't figure out as adults where to put the goalposts, to use an NFL metaphor. And so the answer to your question, I think, is there needs to be, at some point, some time when you slow down. And I tell people, I said, do you think you'd survive riding from New York to Philadelphia on a horse like Jefferson or Washington or those guys did, or Adams? And they can't imagine it, And so I think the answer to your question is a number of things. And the media is certainly part of that. And the media now has come, if you watch the run-up to the debates, it's like watching the preemption or the pre-coverage for the NFL, Super Bowl, the NBA, the World Cup. This is not a game, folks.
It's entertainment.
This is something
it's entertainment. Yeah, it's entertainment.
But everything
is... John, I mean, you made a good point about the young people. We'll say, let's say, people under 30, for argument's sake. Well, maybe under 40. Let's say for under 40, you made a good observation. But what really scares me is the people over 40. 40s, the 50s, the people in the 60s, even in their 70s. How many Americans buy into this hype? The hype that the media and the empire is throwing out them for we'll say decades. I mean, there's a woman at the library who reads all my work, and she would, she's open to what I'm writing, and she's not we'll say that she's not a right winger at all. Okay, she's whatever she is. She's a librarian, very smart, intelligent woman, college graduate, and I was telling her about how much money is being spent, how much of her tax money is going, for the military spending and all these wars and everything. And she says to me, "But Phil, we got to have a strong defense. We got to protect ourselves." And no, I'm just saying, John, that's what you hear from everybody. Look at the ISIS or look at the terrorism. We have to protect ourselves. So how is that? How did that happen? I'm asking you as a person who was well read and well traveled. How did that happen in our country that people are still thinking that way?
Well, I think and I've mentioned this in other places, I think you've got a couple of things going on here. One, there's a deification of the military. No one wants to speak poorly of the military. And look, I was brought up in the military. I've worked in the national security environment and so on and so forth. And the reason people in that environment, in and out of uniform, argue all the time about the correct costs and so on. People would be amazed with that argument. Those you would never hear those conversations. But I think, particularly after 9/11, people got afraid of. If I always joke, I could put a loaf of French bread on the Wilson Bridge up here in Washington, D.C., and it would stop traffic, maybe shut down the city for half a day, thinking it was a bomb. And so people have just gotten and I think they've really bought into the sensationalism of the media and just so scared to death. And I compare and contrast that, and let's go to the military now, too. You have people like General Petraeus and these other generals who, go to the New York Times. When they were in active duty, they go to the New York Times to lobby for their own particular program or particular point of view and so on when they should not. We've long passed the days with General George C. Marshall, who never wore his decorations like Eisenhower.
Right.
We've long gone past the day where you had a civil servant who, as Franklin Roosevelt said, I know when General Marshall and I agree on something, he walks out of this White House, said, I'm not going to get stabbed in the back. He's not going to go to Capitol Hill. He's not going to go lobby. And that's part of the problem. That's gone. So everybody, I know this is going to be a controversial statement, but everybody looks to the military to fight for our freedom and fight for this and that. Who's really protecting us here at home? It's the firefighters. It's the EMTs. It's the good cops. It's neighbors watching out for each other. And I think we've kind of atomized here and lost our sense of community. And even here in D.C., a city where everybody loves to talk, you and I are having a nice conversation here. I couldn't have this conversation with 60%, 70% of the population here in D.C. And that's pretty sad. And
they wouldn't know. They wouldn't even know what you're talking about. They wouldn't even know what you're talking about. They would. See, here's the thing, John, and you brought the thing up about the military, so let's stay on that for a second. And you made some really good points. And it's funny, a friend of mine, Jay Diamond, used to be a former talk show host in New York, and he's very progressive-minded and very, very, very bright man. And he brought this up to me. He said, during World War II, Eisenhower and Marshall, they come out with the regular uniform on, the brown uniform. Yeah. Nowadays, these guys that show up with fruit salad all over them. They got the fruit salad, all the medals. And it's a joke. It looks like a Charlie Chaplin or a Marx Brothers film. Well,
I think you're right. It's the look at me era, and we're all wrapped up in it, right? Everybody wants to have their own blog, and everybody wants to get the old Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame, but every quarter get 15 minutes of fame. And look, on the military side, anything. I had worked for a general once who said, John, never confuse rank with brains or common sense, or position with common sense. So there are some good people out there doing some good things, and there's some good academics actually. And the people that many people don't realize this, but your Navy SEALs or your Delta people, so on, they don't get to do what they do professionally or lead until they're into their early to mid 30s. And a lot of these guys go get master's degrees, and they have conversations of mine. And I know they have conversations among themselves about, wow, why are we shooting first and asking questions later? This policy sucks. It's dumb, you know. But I think really, though, the problem is the deification of the military. You just can't.
Well, here's something else. Here's something else here, John. Too. I remember when Obama sent for what's his name, McChrystal, the colonel,
yes.
McChrystal. There was a big, scandal, or there was a big controversy with McChrystal. So Obama sends for him. He comes to the U.S. I guess he was overseas, right? He was in Afghanistan or Iraq. McChrystal comes to meet with Obama on Air Force One in Denver, Colorado. In Denver, Colorado, John. And they got the picture. McChrystal is in camouflage. He's in camouflage. Now, why is this man in camouflage in Denver, Colorado? Because it has to give the illusion that he's a warrior and he's at war. And during the Iraq invasion, during the invasion of Iraq, if you remember this, when they had the press conferences, in Iraq, but it was at the headquarters, in wherever it was, safe area, right? They had his name was Vincent, was it Brooks? Was he a colonel, a general? And he's giving a press conferences and to reporters, and he's in camouflage. What is this guy doing? We're in camouflage. He didn't come off the lines. But they do that to give the illusion of the war, and it's really very sad, John, very sad.
Well, there's a number of things that are, if you sit and dwell on it, it'll drive you to drink, as they say. But, certainly our infrastructure problems here are very severe. There are islands of economic activity, literally islands, and if you drive out to the Midwest, as you well know, those communities I mentioned earlier, they're in poverty. Our education system, the public education system, is, I think, the backbone, one of the backbones of our country. It's a place where people of different backgrounds used to meet and compete and talk and laugh and live and so on and so forth. But those are the public education system here in this country is being privatized and taken apart. Right. And I think when that happens, when that's complete, then the country is really going to be in trouble, because you're going to have people trying to get into private schools, and then the competition will heat up there. What's the best private school? I don't want to go to this lower class Catholic school, but I can go to this upper scale private Episcopal school. And this notion that competition brings out the best in everybody is not one that I certainly believe in. Competition on a field.
John, if you're being a conspiracy person, which I am, I admit it. Being a conspiracy theorist, I mean, there was this conspiracy to dumb down the American education system, and it's probably about 30 years ago it started to really kick in real heavy, and they've succeeded. They have succeeded because they really don't want kids to go to college, because in college you might have an opportunity to actually think for yourself, so they want people to not go to college so they can become workers. And what kind of workers can they become? Has to be low end, workers. Because if you don't go to college, you're not gonna have intelligence to be able to think for yourself. You're gonna wind up working in Walmart or in some big box store. So this is what they have accomplished, and it carries over into the voting, because as you know and you write about, these two parties are totally bought and paid for by the empire, right? So here's the question for you. Knowing all of this, how can we, people like us, who consider ourselves ahead of the curve and being of certain understanding, how can we help to have this change in the mindset of the American public?
Spend time reading, of course, not online. But here's some advice that I give to students and people who listen. And they're kind of surprised at it. We talked a little bit about the instruments of national power before, and it's very important to understand those and what they signify. It's both our history and our future, and how we manipulate the world and each other and so on. There's the instruments of national power, basically known as dime flip. There's a number of different versions of that, but diplomacy, information, military, economic,